Bonjour and welcome to our second lesson from home. We are still in chapter 2. On fait la fête, and we're continuing on different vocabulary words to know when it comes to giving each other gifts or asking for suggestions, and we're also going to touch on grammar. So let's go over our overview. In this lesson, you will learn how to ask for and give advice. You will learn about direct object pronouns. Actually, we're not going to do indirect object pronouns in this lesson, so we're not going to do this. We're going to apply what we've learned. It's probably going to be too much information if we do direct object pronouns and indirect object pronouns all at once. So let's start with the direct object pronouns, and then after that, in the next lesson, you will learn about indirect object pronouns. All right. Let's start with asking for advice. Alright, there are two ways to ask for advice or suggestions when it comes to giving gifts or asking for how to put a party together or events and things like that. So the two ways that we're going to learn are, the first one is tu as une idée de cadeau pour? Tu as une idée de cadeau pour, and this means do you have an idea for a present for? The other way would be by asking qu'est-ce que je pourrais offrir à? Qu'est-ce que je pourrais offrir à? What could I get for? What could I get for? So these are the two ways that you could use when you are asking a friend, a family member about what to get someone as a gift, when you want to ask for suggestions about and things like that. Okay. The way to respond to it and to give advice, there are two ways to do this. You can either use the conditional tense or you can use the imperative. Okay. The conditional tense will be tu pourrais lui offrir un jeu vidéo. Sorry. Tu pourrais lui offrir un jeu vidéo. So the verb that I underlined there is pourrait, which is the conditional of pouvoir, and it's the equivalent of could, as in you could. So that's one way of answering it. The other way of answering it is to just give them an imperative. And an imperative is giving someone a command, as in do this, do that. Okay? So the imperative would be offre-lui un jeu vidéo. And the imperative verb, the imperative tense here is offre-lui. The verb is offrir, and it's conjugated in the imperative tense. And it gives you offre-lui un jeu vidéo. So you can either use the conditional with tu pourrais, or imperative by giving a command and say offre-lui un jeu vidéo. Get him or get her a video game. In future lessons, you will understand what these pronouns lui are for, what they mean, and why we're using those. Okay? And now, as far as like responding to a suggestion, someone told you do this, do that, or you could do this, you could do that. There are a number of ways to answer to this. You don't have to limit yourself to the three that are in the book. But the ones that your book points out are bonne idée, good idea. Tu n'as pas une autre idée, as in do you have another suggestion? Don't you have something else to suggest me? Or il en a déjà plein. He already has plenty of them. And notice that in this, you have the use of en, which should replace whatever item that was mentioned earlier. Okay? This is not an exhaustive list. This is just the three that the book focuses on. Of course, you can answer this differently, but do bear in mind those three ways of answering, especially if you're If you don't really like an idea that was given to you and you're asking for another suggestion, or if you want to express the fact that person X, Y, or Z already has plenty of item X, Y, Z. Okay? All right. Now it's your turn. You're going to pretend that it's Amelie's birthday. Amelie is your friend, a close relative, or whatever. And you are not really sure what to get her. You ask Sophie, her sister, for advice. You will write a short dialogue with your question, her suggestion, and your response to it. So you will apply what you just learned, you will use the vocabulary that you just learned, and create a very short dialogue going on. Your question, the Sophie's answer, and then your response to it. Okay? And when you're done, you can move on to the notes for slide 7, which is about grammar. Okay, so this bit is about direct objects. I'm not pretty sure if you already know about direct objects, how familiar you are with them, if you learned about them in language arts or not. If you do have some experience with direct objects, if you already have some prior knowledge, this here should be very easy, very straightforward. But if you don't, I'm going to go over it, break it down for you, so that when I explain it in regards to the French, to how it works in French, it will make sense. Okay. A direct object is either a person or a thing that receives the action of the verb, and it usually answers the what or the who question. It kind of sounds confusing, but it will make sense as I break it down for you. Alright, so for example, I came up with this example. I decided to do something different from the book. The book has something else for you, but I decided to go with this. And the example that I came up with is Tom writes a letter. Okay? Tom writes a letter. In this sentence, Tom is the subject, writes is the verb, and a letter is the direct object. And as I told you before, the direct object answers the what question, basically. So in this sentence, in order to know what the quote-unquote what is, you could ask yourself, Tom writes what? He writes a letter. So a letter is the answer to the what question. So a letter, therefore, is the direct object. It is the direct object of the verb write. Okay? I hope it makes sense. I hope it makes sense. If it doesn't, bear with me. All right. Moving on to the pronouns. Okay. I'm still doing it based on the English, and then we're going to move on to the French, so that you can kind of have a frame of reference. Direct objects can be nouns or pronouns. To avoid repetition, direct object pronouns will replace the direct object. So for example, in that same sentence that I gave you, Tom writes a letter, you can use a direct object pronoun to replace a letter. Say if you're gonna reference it several times, if you don't want to sound repetitive, you can replace a letter with the corresponding pronoun, direct object pronoun for it. Okay? So we already know that Tom is the subject and writes is the verb, and a letter is the direct object. Now the pronoun that would replace a letter in English would be it. Okay? It. Tom writes it. When it comes to people, those direct object pronoun will change. So for example, I changed the sentence into Katie sees her dad. Katie sees who? Katie sees him. Her dad is the direct object, of the verb see, because you can ask yourself, Katie sees what or Katie sees who? She sees her dad. So her dad is the direct object, and it can be replaced by the direct object pronoun him. So as you may have guessed by now, the direct object pronouns in English are me, you, him, her, us, you, and them. Okay? So that's how we can avoid being repetitive by not constantly repeating the object, so to speak, and replace it with a direct object pronoun. Okay? Again, in the example, the second one with Katie, Katie sees her dad. Katie is the subject. Sees is the verb. What does she see? She sees her dad. Or who does she see? She sees her dad. Therefore, it can be replaced by the direct object pronoun him. It sounds very fancy and very complicated, but it really isn't. Now, when it comes to French, the direct object pronoun, they pretty much serve the same purpose. They serve the purpose of not constantly have to repeat the direct object constantly and be able to replace them with a pronoun. Okay? And in French, these pronouns are me for me. Don't pronounce it me. It's written the same as the English version, but it's not pronounced the same. It's pronounced me. Me. The direct object pronoun for you is te. Te. Him is le. Her is la. Or it can be an L apostrophe depending if we're having a noun that begins with a vowel or an H. And then an object would be like something that's inanimate, will be it. Us will be nous. Sorry, I meant to write vous. You, formal or plural, is vous. And then them would be les. So as you can see, there are certain pronouns that are the same ones as the subject pronouns, as in nous and vous, and the other ones are different. Me and te are different. Le, la, les. They kind of seem familiar because we know them from our definite articles, feminine and masculine and plural. But in this specific instance, they serve as direct object pronouns. Okay, as far as the placement is concerned, when you're talking to the present tense, the direct object pronouns will always go before the conjugated verb. Okay? For example, ils achètent le gâteau. Ils achètent le gâteau. Il is the subject, achète is the verb. Le gâteau is the direct object. You can ask yourself the question, ils achètent quoi? They buy what? The cake. Le gâteau. Therefore, le gâteau is the direct object. The pronoun will be L apostrophe because the verb starts with an A, and it comes right before the A. When it comes to infinitive, the direct object pronoun goes before the infinitive. Ils vont acheter le gâteau. Ils vont l'acheter. Your L apostrophe comes before your conjugated verb. And now it's your turn. Translate the sentences in French, then rewrite them using the appropriate direct object pronoun. Tom writes a letter. Kitty sees her dad, then looks at the girl. And when you're done, you are done.